3. Hello, everybody. This is Cyrus here with Craig Hogan. So we're going to do an interview. Before we jump into this, you are watching Afterlife Topics at Metaphysics. We talk about this kind of crazy supernatural stuff, and so we're excited to have a special guest on tonight. And this is actually presented through Afterlife University, so we'll also have some of our patrons here as well, be able to ask questions. And you may notice that the audio kind of sucks at the moment because I am now presently in Lebanon after I left Ethiopia, and my bag was lost somewhere between Africa and Lebanon, and with it was lost all my audio equipment, my nicer webcam, all of that. So the audio is going to kind of suck on my side, and you might hear loud clicking noises if I'm switching over to Craig, because the microphone on the laptop is next to the mouse clicker, and I also lost my wireless mouse. So that's me. I'm a mess, but fortunately we have a cool guest here, and also I lost all my clothes, so I have. All I have left is my black T-shirts. I bought this nice Hawaiian T-shirt, and that's all the clothing I have left now. But I think I'm going to get my backpack back, but it's going to be a pain in the butt. Anyway, I'm going to turn it over to Craig Hogan. So this is a exciting guest. Craig Hogan is the president of the Afterlife Research Institute. Let me make sure I'm saying that right. Afterlife Research Education Institute, correct?
That's it. Mm-hmm.
And
right.
You're the author of Your Eternal Self, and Craig basically is one of the biggest pioneers and most important people in the afterlife field of study. So life after death is a field of study that is obviously expanding quite a lot, and so something we do on this channel is trying to shine a light on all of that. So I can't think of a more important person to have on than Craig. So anyway, Craig, how are you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing good, Cyrus. It's always a delight to see you.
Oh, thank you very much. We last saw at the Afterlife conference in Scottsdale last year, and so it's been like 8 or 9 months, I guess. Cool, great. So, and also hello to Corey and Paula, patrons who are attending as well. So, I guess let's kind of jump into it. When I was first hearing about your work, of course, it was related to the conference in Scottsdale, and I've known about your book, Your Eternal Self. And I kind of want to ask you, for people who are not familiar with your work, because there's many different angles that we can take in the subject of an afterlife and the subject of the conditions we go to when we die. And what is your angle, if you have one? Maybe you can kind of let people know who are new to your work.
Sure. There is now a science of the afterlife and afterlife communication studies, and we are learning things every day. We have pioneers who are advancing the work, and they are spending their days in trying to help humankind to understand what we know about the afterlife and afterlife communication. We now know about 16 methods of having afterlife communication that are very, very favorable. They are successful. And one of them is actually 98% successful. So we now can communicate easily with the afterlife. We know what it's like on the other side. We know what it's like during the transition to the other side. And so right now what I'm doing is I'm writing a book which is going to take people through understanding from the process of first the higher self deciding to put someone into Earth school, which is what we're in now, and all the way through the process when they make the transition out of Earth school and they go on to the next realm of life, what it is that happens, why the Earth school is set up this way, what we can expect at all of these stages in our lives, and why the things are happening to us that are happening now. So this is a science now. We know what the truths are about it, and all we have to do is communicate it to people because it's all out there. So that's my angle. That's where I'm coming from.
Great. I do have a question that I think, kind of coming from my perspective, which is attempting to get to the truth of these subjects. That's the angle of my books. And based upon what you just told me, when it comes to, let's say, for example, you said that there's one technique that's 96% accurate. I think So when we are dealing with what I guess we could call direct and accurate spirit communication, if we even want to call it spirit, I mean, the terminologies I think are changing pretty quickly. would you say that there is consistency in how or what we know about that side? Because many people have questions. It's like, is it just what is in our imagination? Is it a real and literal place? How do
Mhm.
we come to terms with some of those concepts? And I guess my question is there consistency? What they say, no matter who's doing the research, no matter who is the investigator, do they say the same things? And is there like a way to get kind of a consistent pattern of understanding what that side is like?
Yeah, there definitely is. And the people who are doing the best work in this area are Dennis Grega and Michelle Szabo. Dennis has a website called afterlifedata.com and another website called afterlifelibrary.com. But they've done extensive research. They're not only cataloging all the information about the afterlife and afterlife communication, but they're doing research on the consistencies among all of the reports. They have found with over 3,000 sources, I believe it's 3,000 sources now, that they are getting a 97% consistency rate among them. So the various sources, and when I say sources, these are largely people who are communicating from the other side. So the people who are living there, we're getting reports from the inhabitants of these other realms. And there is a 97% consistency rate among them, which means that the data is very reliable among the witnesses to it. And we have this across time and across sources and in various geographical areas. And they all come down to the same conclusions about the afterlife, about what we know about it, about the nature of reality in the afterlife and in this life, and about communication. So we have a great amount of consistency, and that's where the science is coming in. Science goes through various stages. The first stage is called the natural history stage, when a science is being developed. And in the natural history stage, there are pioneers who, such as Burbank in biology, who are just reporting things. They're just discovering things and writing them down and seeing consistencies and patterns. And in the natural history stage, it's a history of the way that things are right now. From that, then it evolves into the experimental stage, in which people are able to make experiments based upon it and discover truths. And then from that, then it becomes a science with laws and other consistencies. We are still in the natural history stage. So we're still at the early stage of reporting things. We're discovering patterns and we're learning things from the other side. And we will soon then be into the stage in which we're able to do more experimentation. We're going to be doing interviews with people from the other side, very pointed interviews in which we're attempting to find out things about them. And we'll have these consistent interviews in which we discover the things that we need to know about the other side. So that's where we are now in it. And it is a science of the afterlife. It is a science of communication. There's great consistency among all of the sources, and they corroborate each other. And each time we learn something new, it fits into the pattern of what we learned in the past.
Right. And so somebody like myself, I mean, for people who read my books, I do a lot in the work of astral projection. And sometimes, well, something I'm still curious about is it kind of seems like there's very different areas, very different perspectives from different sources on the other side. So when I practice astral projection, it's almost like I'm in one particular, if you want to call it a country or a type of realm, but other people go to different types of realms. And is there any difficulty in discerning between these types of environments? For example, like with your experiments with spirit communication, wow, someone is like, there's a bunch of fireworks going off. I'm in Beirut. I don't know,
Hopefully it works.
but basically they love celebrating things here. So
Uh-huh.
if somebody wins a football match, there'll be fireworks. Anyway,
Yeah.
so for example, I do astral projection, and oftentimes I find myself in these urban environments that are connected to cities on this side. And I know Suzanne Wilson recently mentioned this in one of her videos talking about her own astral experiences and mentioning how the other side has corresponding cities to this side. And I noticed that's what I experienced the most. I'm kind of wondering in your guys' experiments, because you guys do a lot of work in spirit communication, do you get any consistent areas of information about kind of what we experience with like cities, actual cities and civilizations and people going about jobs and work and the kinds of things that we've seen as in the out-of-body experience realm.
Yeah, we do. And I'd recommend that anybody read Anthony Borgia's book, The Life in the World Unseen. And Anthony Borgia was channeling a person who had crossed over to the next plane of life, whose name is Monsignor Hugh Benson. And Monsignor Hugh Benson was describing what life was like on the other side. And his descriptions are very graphic and very good. And I would recommend that anybody read the book. And what he was describing is the same thing that Leslie Flint's, the people who came through Leslie Flint. Leslie Flint was a medium, a physical medium, a direct voice medium, who lived in the latter part of the 20th century. And he would have people come through and speak from the other side, and his
Right.
or fireworks. And he would have people come through and they would speak just like they were speaking in a microphone, because he had an ectoplasmic voice box that formed on his shoulder, and through the voice box then the voices would communicate. And when the people communicated to the other side, they described what life is like there. And their descriptions align perfectly with what Borgia has in his book and what others have as well. But in answer to the question, yes, on the other side, that's what we found. We have found that they have cities, they have rivers, they have mountains. People can go fishing, they can go in and swimming in the ocean. They go to concerts, and the concerts have musical instruments that we can't even imagine. They can go through strolls through the countryside, and there are flowers, beautiful large flowers and growing things in the countryside. There are animals there the same way that there are animals here, but the animals are not afraid of people. And so it is very much the same thing as we have here. We would relate to it very easily. We would understand. In fact, some people feel when they cross over and they communicate back, they say they felt like they were in a dream. They felt like they were going to wake up, because it's just exactly the same kind of world. But then they would have loved ones come to them and reassure them that they had already crossed over. But the life there is very much like life here, except without the drawbacks, without any of the things that we have that are negative for us here, including especially death and disease. So yes, what we have found is that the life is very much like, on the other side, very much like what we live here.
And would you say, because there's a common, no more fireworks, really? Okay, I don't know what they're celebrating this time. Like I said, somebody probably won a football match. Probably somebody's cousin won a football match.
Yes, just anything, yeah, right.
Now they have to party.
Yeah.
So there's kind of this mythology, I guess, I don't call it mythology, but urban legend, if you will, that in the periphery of this community, people try to say that our experiences in that kind of world must be some kind of an illusion, because when we die, we have to become spirits or phantasms existing as little orbs of light, or basically ghosts that go boo, and it'd be impossible to have a physical, solid environment with cities, trees, and things like that, because how can something like that exist if we're dead, right? So a lot of people have a really difficult time crossing that barrier. So on this channel, we have, are these more fireworks? Okay. On this channel, hold on. I just wish that they would okay, you're done celebrating, great. Anyway, so there is this kind of, I don't know if we'll call it paranoia or negativity surrounding this sometimes, to say, well, so you had astral experience and you were in a real place, and there was cities and there was people walking around and people going about their lives. And I've reported, and people who follow this channel and people who comment have reported everything from restaurants to tire shops, almost anything you can think of that's here seems to be happening on that side. And some people can't, it's almost that they can't process it, they can't believe it. They think that perhaps this is all an illusion, or it's a mental construct, or it's some kind of dream, and it's not real. So what do spirit people in your guys' experiments have to say about that? Do they say that, hey, we still have some kind of a solid physical body? Do they describe anything about how that works?
Yeah, and the reason that people feel that is because there's this ignorant prejudice that this is the only real life, and whatever comes after that is the afterlife, and that somehow that's different, and they regard this as the real life. That if people could, they would stay here and they wouldn't go to the afterlife, and that's simply not true. The fact is that we are on a spiritual plane. The earth plane is a spiritual plane, just like the other spiritual planes, and there are millions of spiritual planes. But the earth plane is one spiritual plane, and then after we go from the earth plane, then we go on to another spiritual plane. But it's just a change of our focus. It's a change of our attunement to the realm that we're in. So now we're attuned to the physical realm, and that means that while we're in the physical realm, we all share the experience of touching a chair. So we can touch things, and we can experience sights, and we can experience smells, and so we experience all of those things in this realm. But in the next realm, we experience them in exactly the same way. So the next realm is just like this. In fact, people wake up on the other side and they think that they are, and there are people who are walking around, and you know this from the out of body experiences, people who are walking around now in the next realm, and after they've crossed, after they've transitioned, they believe themselves to still be alive. They believe themselves to still be on the same earth plane, and because there are actually scientists who are materialists, who don't believe in anything beyond the material realm, who are on the other side in groups now, who are trying to figure out why they're there and how they got there and what it all means. And it's still from a materialist perspective. So it is so real on the next plane of life that people feel like it is the earth plane, just without any of the difficulties that are involved, and at a much higher level. In other words, there are colors there that we can't see here. We don't experience here. There are sounds. There is ambient sound that if people want to hear it. The flowers not only have sights, beautiful flowers, and they have odors, but they also have music that comes from the flowers. And all of these things, though, are just as real and just as substantial as they are here. We would say there is matter and energy. In the same way that there is here, there is matter and energy there, but that's only an illusion. It's just the fact that we have the sense of experiences of matter and energy. So we have the experiences here, we have the same experiences there.
Right, and there's actually, there's a couple things that come to mind even when you present all of that. One is in relation to, I guess, terminology. So when we talk about the afterlife, I think that's the thing people have a difficult time with. Like I even have a friend across from me right now who probably thinks that this is all like some really crazy, wild stuff. But what I like to tell people who are trying to learn about this for the first time, what the subject is, and what I write about and what you study concerns other dimensions. So what you want to call it, parallel universes, the multiverse, or dimensions. This is the actual field of study. So we wouldn't be calling this field of afterlife research. It just so happens that when we die physically here, our consciousness shifts into a different dimension. And I feel like that's going to be the future when it comes to, I guess, how the terminology of this subject evolves. So based upon more of like multi-dimensional research, right? But I also wanted to mention about the phenomenon of people who are still clinging to the same beliefs from here, who end up on that side. And for example, the skeptics you talked about. And I say this because somebody who does the out-of-body experience work, and having spoken to people on that side, I have spoken to people who seem to be unaware of the condition that they're in, and they're very confused about it, and still claiming that they are basically mortal. That because I'll ask them, so you died before, do you think that you can die again? And they'll say, oh yeah, of course. What kind of question is that? So they'll still even believe that they still have a mortal body, because they don't have any frame of reference of anything other than that. And that could be a big problem, because we even had a discussion about this on the group recently, which is that if somebody lives on that side and believes completely that they're still susceptible to physical injury, or even that their body could die, then because thoughts can mold that side, they could end up still in a situation where that kind of thing could still happen. So I guess to transition from that, how do you feel about the education on this subject? How do you prevent people from ending up in that kind of a situation? And how do you feel that more education can be brought to people about this?
Yeah, people who cross over right now are ignorant. Most of them don't understand what it is that they're entering. They don't realize the kind of world that they're going to be coming into, and they don't prepare for it on this side, and therefore on the other side, when they do come over to the other side, they have to go through a period of schooling and understanding of what it is that's happened to them and where they are. There are counselors there who work with them to try to help them to understand the changes that have occurred to them. People who understand it on this side, who understand what life is like, what life on the other realms are like, have a much better transition. They're much more able to go to the other side and very quickly acculturalize themselves to it, because they know what to expect and they know what's going to be coming. So what we have to do now is we have to educate people on this side. It not only will help them to live their lives better here, but it will prepare them for what's going to be happening for them. And they can look forward to that transition, because right now people are fearful of the transition, and they are frightened of it, and there's no reason to be. It's just a transition into another stage of life. It's like going from childhood into adolescence, or an adolescence into adulthood. So eventually then the textbooks we can expect are going to have, in the stages of life that you see in standard textbooks now, there's going to be a stage of life which is the transition. That'll be the last stage. It will go from adulthood into elderly, into the transition to the next realm of life, and that's going to just be a normal part of life, and that will happen in the future because people really understand what it is that happens to them. But right now, we're in the process of we're in a world that is full of ignorance, full of superstition, of misunderstanding, of fear, and we're trying to help people to get over that, to get past that, to change. And eventually, hopefully, there'll be a change in humankind as a result of that.
Right. And so going on that a little bit, I understand that you're also involved, at least to some extent, with the cell phone work back in the States. And so it seems like potentially, possibly, there's some kind of a bridge between science and technology and contacting other parallel dimensions. So we see that with Rinaldi's work. And so the cell phone stuff gets a lot of press, a lot of news, a lot of gossip. And so I was wondering if maybe you could fill people in a little bit about how that works. I've heard you mention some kind of a photon-related technology before.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Expand on that a little bit, and maybe tell us if there's been any news or developments with this alleged trans-dimensional communication technology.
Mm-hmm. Sure. It's instrumental transcommunication, and what is happening now is there are a variety of focuses in instrumental transcommunication. One of them is Sonia Rinaldi's work. You mentioned Sonia. And what she does is she does recordings in which she has a background sound, which is a vocalization broken up into segments. So there are no words in it, but it's the vocalizations of a voice-like sound. And when she plays the vocalizations and asks questions and records both the questions and the vocalizations together, when she plays them back, she gets the answers to the questions. So the answers are on the recording. And she's doing that consistently now. She's been doing it since 2001. And she's had readings, especially for parents of children who are on the other side. And she does as many as, she did as many as 163 in a month, and giving the parents the recordings. And some of the recordings had 200 messages on them from the children. So they are recordings that people can hear. They're able to imprint on the hard drive of the computer the electromagnetic symbols that then will come back, will play back as being voices, but they're not really voices. They're just the electromagnetic signals that are then imprinted. But she's able to do that consistently. A woman now named Sherry Pearl, who's in New York, is doing that work for parents. She has the prayer registry, which is online, and she does recordings for parents and gives them to them. So that's one variety of it now. Another variety is by Hans Otto Koenig, who develops equipment. So he's got actually the equipment to be able to communicate with people on the other side. And his focus is on communicating with higher dimensions. So he gets recordings of people communicating from the sixth and seventh levels of dimensions on the other side. And we can listen to the recordings. We have recordings of them. And he has two books. One of the books that the Afterlife Research and Education Institute actually published for him. And he has recordings that he has given to us. And we have the recordings of them now. But there are people from higher dimensions who are speaking to us on the earth plane about the earth plane and the destiny of the earth plane and how we can change life here. So that's another one. Marcello Bacci, who just passed away, actually had an old tube radio that he would tune. And as he tuned it, then he would get the voices of people speaking from the other side. And the parents would come in and they would sit. He had as many as 70 people sitting in his living room at one time. And the people would come through on this old tube radio and they would speak to their loved ones. And they would have conversations with them, speaking back and forth. And Marcello has just passed away, and we don't have anybody who's doing that work now. But Annabella Cardoso, who is in Portugal, who is actually a diplomat, has been doing that kind of work called direct radio voice. But you asked about the cell phone. So that's just another one of the focuses of instrumental transcommunication. Gary Schwartz at the University of Arizona, who is doing the work with the cell phone, he's the pioneer who owns that technology, is developing a device that counts photons. A photon is a particle of light. And he suggested that possibly those who are on the next plane of life could come into the earth plane and could manipulate the photons because they're very small, there's no weight to them, they have no dimension, but that they would be able to manipulate them, and they could send them through a photon detector. And the photon detector then would be able to see bursts of photons, like there'd be a few million photons going through all of a sudden. And he was hoping then that they would somehow be able to move that into being able to translate into letters. So letter A maybe 100 photons coming through, and the letter B maybe 500 photons, and that they would be able to send through the photons, and that would convert into letters, and then you could go into a device in which it would spit out then either vocal or written words then from the other side. So he's been working on that for about 10 years now. He was successful in having some people from the other side who are collaborating with him, intentionally collaborating there. It's like a team on the other side. So he's had the people from the other side, and he's had Harry Houdini, who is always working with people on this side to try to enhance communication with the other side. A woman named Susie, who was a psychic medium whom he knew before she had passed into the next life, and an angel named Angel Sophia. And he enlisted them, and they then would send through bursts through this device of photons. And so he was successful in getting them to send through bursts. And so now he's working on trying to develop a prototype to show that this can be done consistently. I don't know that he's talking about the possibility of having a breakthrough soon, but I don't think he's arrived there yet. So the cell phone is not yet a reality. We are getting recordings from the other side. We're getting recordings through materialization mediums such as David Thompson and Stuart Alexander. So we're getting the voices from the other side coming through, but we're also getting them through Sonia's work and Sherry Carroll's work, and they are getting recordings of people. So we are getting instrumental transcommunication, people speaking through instruments, and videos of them. They're getting the videos of the faces from the other side. So that is successful, even though the cell phone right now is still in its experimental stage.
Do you think that there could be any difficulties, and maybe this is something that you've encountered in your research, sometimes this is a topic comes up here in the classes or also in the group, which is that, like, if these people in these higher dimensions wanted to basically open the veil and get in touch with us, they could, and that there may be some stipulations involved with this type of technology to where maybe there are groups on that side who don't want us to have devices where we can just pick up a phone call and talk to them. Maybe they feel on a philosophical level we're supposed to be blocked off from them. And maybe that's part of the whole, as you call it, Earth school process, is not being in touch with the other side. Now, personally, I kind of feel like we need to be arbiters of our own destiny. So if we want to change the world by suddenly having a device where we can talk to deceased people, then I think that we should have the be able to make a decision to do that. But some people have told me, in fact, even the physical medium Marcus Lang has described like those that he communicates with requiring permission to be able to do certain types of things. So have you encountered anything like that? Could something like that pose a problem in the future?
Yeah, all of that is true. We do need to work with teams on the other side. They do need to work with us and give us permission to do it. They also then from what we understand about the occurrences, they are given permission or they're able to work with us at a certain level by some higher authority on the other side. So we know that that's true. As far as how much we're going to be able to communicate with them or how easily, whether we can get on the telephone and just call up the other side. In the book I had mentioned, Life in the World Unseen by Anthony Borgia, Hugh Benson from the other side says that it was not meant that we would not be able to communicate with the other side, that we should be able to communicate with the other side, and that once we are able to communicate, they will be able to do wonderful things for us. They will be able to help us more, and they'll be able to do more things for us. So their suggestion, and from what we've heard from other people on the other side, is that we can communicate better. We can have these kinds of communications, but whether it's going to be a cell phone or not is a different matter. And so we don't know. I doubt that that's true, that we're going to be able to simply pick up a phone and talk to people on the other side. But it is true that we are able to get through to them now through physical mediums, mental mediums, trance mediums, and others like the instrumental trance communication. So we are able to get through to them. They do give us advice. They work with us individually. And so we do have communication with them. And we can enhance that communication. To what extent, we don't know yet whether they'll be able to, but it requires the cooperation of the teams from the other side. They have to believe that what we're doing is a spiritual intent and it is a value to humankind. And if it is, then they will cooperate with us. But on the other hand, the more important thing is that we are continually in communication with the other side, as each of us as individuals. We are all communicating with the other side much more than we realize. We're getting guidance from our guides on the other side, from helpers on the other side. We're getting messages from our loved ones and people who, when someone transitions to the other side and they say, well, Harry transitioned, a month ago and I haven't heard a thing from him. I haven't gotten any signs. They're looking for butterflies and coins and all the other physical signs. But the fact is that Harry's been communicating with her every day. And the people are just not getting the messages. They're just not listening. They're not hearing them. So, but each one of us is a medium in that sense. Each one of us can get our own communications with people on the other side who are always trying to communicate with us. And so what we do is we have a training program online now, and it's a free training program that AREI has developed. And it teaches people how to go into the state of in which they can allow the communications to come through to them. And it's at selfguided.spiritualunderstanding.org. And it's free to anybody who wants to do it. People who go through it, the people who go through the whole training program, 86% of them are able to communicate with their loved ones on the inside. And some people are doing that regularly now. They just go into that state of mind every day. And I mentioned that the method is 98% successful. It's called repair and reattachment psychotherapy. It's done by state licensed psychotherapists. And they're able to help the client sitting in their office go into the state of mind using a technique called EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. And they go into the state of mind in which they can have the communication occur. And the person then has a communication with them. And during this process, with their eyes closed, when they're going through the experience, they sometimes walk with them, they touch them, they embrace them, they hug them, they swim with them, they go through all sorts of experiences with them in their mind. And that's 98% successful. So we are, each one of us, able individually to communicate. We just have to learn how to do it.
Do you think with that particular protocol, when it comes to using a visualization technique, that sometimes this could be a mental experience and not like a literal, as we call, astral experience. Because, for example, in a true astral experience, you should be able to physically really, really be there before the lucid,
Mhm.
be able to pick up the sand and feel it in your fingers, right? But if it's
Mhm.
a visualization exercise, do you think that it's still communication, but it's happening more inside of our mental space than it is like in a actual environment on that side?
Yeah, it is in the mind, but you know the fact that all sensory experiences are only in the mind. They're not in the body. We don't have sensory experiences in the body. The body can't have an experience. Every experience that we have is an experience in the mind. So we see things in the mind, we hear things in the mind, we have pain in the mind, and that's why people can be hypnotized and they can have surgery because pain is in the mind, it's not in the body. So all these things are happening in the mind. So that when someone has a telepathic experience or an experience with a person in the mind, what they're doing is they're getting the same sensory experiences that they would get if they were actually having them in the physical world. And so then they actually do have the same feelings. They can touch the sand. They can feel the embrace. They can feel the kiss. And so all of these things that are happening in the mind are just as real as they are when they're happening in the physical environment. And that's the way that people describe them. So when they have these experiences with the psychotherapist, they come out saying it was incredibly real. It was just like I was there. It was like I was having these experiences and I was there. I touched her hair. I felt her embrace. And so then these experiences that are in the mind are just as real as physical experiences.
But then do you think that it's happening in a literal objective reality? Because we can create anything we want in our minds. We could create an ocean of candy canes and cotton candy and boats made of gingerbread, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's a literal objective place on that side. For example, Anthony Rather Benson was in an actual community that exists objectively for anybody who would go there and could
Mhm.
potentially, you could astral project, or you could kick the bucket the old fashioned way and go to the objective, tangible place. Whereas a mental construction is kind of like what we may call a lucid dream. So do you
Mhm.
think that in this case, these people are having lucid dreams, or do you think that it's kind of like an induced astral projection state where they are really in an environment, if that makes any sense?
Mhm. Yeah, I know what you mean. And it depends on our understanding of reality. And what is reality? Reality is only experiences in the mind. So there is no physical universe. There is no material matter. There is no energy. These things are only experiences that the mind has. So we are having the experience of this reality that we're having, this interaction that we're having. This is only experiences. It isn't a physical reality. And so then what we're looking at is different levels of that experiential space, different realities of levels of mind. And so when we have an experience that is in the mind that is an out of body experience, it's just a different form of experience than the physical realm, which is a different form of experience than these repair and reattachment confrontations that people have with people on the other side. They're just different forms of experiences, but they're all mental. I mean, they're all in the mind, and it's the big mind, or what Tom Campbell calls the big C consciousness, which is like the mind of God. And so all these things are happening in the mind. They're just different forms of ways that they're happening in the mind, but essentially the experiences are the same. So the experience of sight is the same when somebody has a near-death experience and they have sights of things, or if they have an out of body experience, or we're in the physical realm, we're having experiences. They're all sight, and we'd say yes, sight. There is one thing called sight, and all of these are forms of that. There are different ways of getting sight, the experience of sight, but they're all sight. And so these experiences are the same regardless of the medium that's being used.
But I guess, I don't want to go on this topic for too long, but the sort of the confusing part, maybe for myself and maybe for other people, is just where do we draw the distinction between an objective shared mental space, like the reality we're in right now, versus one that is entirely inside of one's own mind. And for example, I mean, if you do this induced kind of communication method and you appear in a house, the question is if this is an objective house that would exist in a parallel dimension, or if this will disappear, collapse, disintegrate as soon as the experience is over, right? You know, would you be in a realm that you can map it out, and like I have done in places I've been to in astral states, you can map it out. You can go back to the same place again and again, right? But would that be impossible in these kind of mental constructions? Um, just maybe real quick, do you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, it's still all experience. So what we say when we say we're having the experience of the physical realm, for instance, we'll start with that and then go to the out of body experience. When we have the experience of the physical realm, then we each share the experience of a chair. But we're only each sharing the experience of the chair. The chair is not there. There is no objective chair. And we know that from quantum mechanics. We know that when you walk out of a room, there's no conscious being there to collapse the wave function. There is nothing there. There are only probabilities, only possibilities of things existing there. There is nothing there. But when someone comes in, it collapses that room into existence. And then we have the experience of that room. So each one of us has the experience of the chair, but it's only an individual experience. I have the experience of the chair, you have the experience of the chair, and so then we think the chair is out there because we each have the same experience. That experience is happening in the mind, in the big M mind, or the big C consciousness, in the mind of God. And so each one of us has that same dream or had that same experience, but we're only having experiences as individuals. So what you're asking is, can we have that experience of a chair if we're going into this guided afterlife communication, for instance, where people mentally then they have these communications, and there are instances in which that does happen. There are shared crossings in which people cross over, transition to the next side, and the loved ones are around them at that time, share the same experience, and they all share it, and they describe what happened afterwards. There's another in which Al Botkin, whom I co-authored a book with on induced after-death communications, describes when he was training as another psychotherapist in how to do this method. The psychotherapist being trained was sitting in the room with the client and Al Botkin. And as Al Botkin put the person into the trance in which he had this experience, the being trained psychotherapist who was sitting there had closed his eyes and he had the same experience. And then after he opened his eyes and the client opened his eyes and they started comparing notes on what happened, and they had exactly the same experience with each other. There's another instance in which Charles Tart had two graduate students who had been hypnotizing each other, hypnotize each other, and then agree that they were going off on a vacation together. And so they were going to have this experience together. So they sat there with their eyes closed and in complete silence. And they then after hypnotizing each other, and they went on an experience. And when they came out, then they objectively both described, previous to sharing the experience, they both described in writing what they had experienced, and the experiences were identical. They shared the experience. So these experiences are shared. They are experiences that we have. We just don't normally have shared experiences like we do in the earth realm, like that chair. So we do have our own experiences when we go into communicating with a loved one, and we don't share that with somebody else, but it is shareable. You know, it could be shared, and so then what we experience is reality. When we say something is reality only because we are sharing the experience of the chair. But that reality, when I'm having a communication with my grandmother, in my mind, is just as real.
So I'm going to go ahead and open up to see if Corey or Paula wanted to ask you anything. Then we can kind of also talk about the next book that you're working on a little bit. So Corey, Paula, do you guys have any questions for Craig?
I'd just like to say thank you. I think that's one of the best descriptions of how the mind works that I've heard. I'm gonna study that some more and copy it. I've really been trying to describe that to other people, and I haven't done a very good job. So thank you for putting that in good words.
Sure.
And anybody have any questions for Craig?
Yeah, I want just to say thank you, and it's a very important topic for me because I have a son and he's on the spiritual world, and he left this world 3 years ago when he was 20 years old, and after that I'm just like in a that's my life purpose, to learn about afterlife, to also help other people, and I'm part of all the groups, helping parents healing, everything around this possible available. And I was able to have I was very luck. I don't know. I did a lot of study to get on that. Be able to do a couple out-of-body experiences and to meet with him, and everything that you said resonated with him, and it was like an incredible place with the colors. Everything was more vivid and looked like similar to here, but like in another level, much more refined. And I was able to meet with my son, and it was just, and ask him the question if he liked more the physical world where he was before or the dimension where he is now. And it just said, oh, Mom, this is.
Are you there, Paula? I think we might have lost you. Or maybe it's me who's frozen.
Hey everybody, I hope you enjoyed this interview with Craig Hogan. The last few minutes were unfortunately cut off because my wireless was disconnected at my hostel at the time in Beirut, Lebanon. But I just wanted to finish off the interview by talking a little bit about Craig's book that's coming out. So Craig does have a new book he's working on. This is what he was going to talk about next before we got cut off. And it essentially is like a walkthrough from the inception of our creation as a soul on through our basically our whole lifespan, where we begin going through the incarnation process on Earth, on through entering, graduating to other realms. It is a detailed, step-by-step kind of exploration of the process that we all go through. So it's a very, very interesting metaphysical reference. So I hope that you guys go out and grab that book by Craig Hogan when it is released. And that's about it. So I want to also put in a couple of thoughts about the interview that we just had, and hopefully you can see me okay, because it looks like I'm about to go toward the light as we speak, because we have the sun facing us this way, and on this little balcony I don't have a place to put my laptop elsewhere, but so I had a few thoughts about what he was talking about, and as you may remember during that interview, I was pressing him a little bit to try to figure out what is a nagging question in this area, which is the nature of objective reality versus a dreamscape, a subjective world, something that is generated by thought. And so I wouldn't say it's a problem, but it's like the kind of the nagging question that was on my mind while I was hearing about Craig's hypnotherapy-based visualization, guided visualization, afterlife contact techniques that he promotes and supports. Is that, how do we know if these are visions of a more literal world, or is it a kind of like a brief foray into a subjective state, as we say, like a dream world? And what is the difference between these things? And in some ways, Craig was arguing that there is not a difference between these states of existence, be it a lucid dream or the reality that we are in right now. And this is a big metaphysical, philosophical sort of bugaboo. It's a big conundrum. It's the kind of thing that keeps people like me up at night. Maybe it keeps you up at night if you watch this channel. I do have my interpretation, though, and it's that if you are encountering deceased loved ones in a visualization process, then I would call this a shared dream connection. I think that the thing that separates this reality from any other reality that is mental or that is subjective or that is dreamlike is the fact that our, if you want to call it normal reality or consensus reality or shared reality, is a persistent world where everybody is involved in it. So here on the streets of Athens, Greece, where I am right now for a couple of days, kind of like on a little layover actually, you know, it's a big bustling place with many different cultures, and you know, people sometimes at odds with each other, but everyone is learning to work together. But it's persistent, so I go to sleep at night and I wake up, and hopefully Athens, Greece as a realm is still here, as it's been here for thousands of years. Well, the same can be said on other planes, other realms. You know, we can only hope that these are persistent worlds where we all share a reality together. But this is what spirits tell us in their communications, that they always say we're in a real solid place that stays here from one moment to the next. That we're not in some kind of dreamscape. And they often stress this point because I think it's very easy for us to confuse these things together, because there is something that we can do on that side, something that they can do on that side that they tell us as well, which is that they can enter into shared dream spaces. And it's very similar to the holodeck from Star Trek. And so just tapping into, I guess you get called cosmic consciousness, and in Star Trek it can be represented by the supercomputer on board the spaceship. You can create a whole program, a whole simulation of a whole environment, and then you can take a friend with you into that environment and explore whatever you want. And it's so much like the holodeck. It's kind of crazy. I mean, I think there was a little bit of channeled information coming through Star Trek, to be honest, because there's so much good metaphysical spiritual info if you watch the old TNG series and the original Roddenberry stories. I don't know about all this, all the new Star Trek shows that I hear are not that good. I'm all about TNG. So it's very similar to that, and from what I've experienced communicating with what we call spirit people, or just people in other planes, other dimensions, this is like their main hobby. This is what they love to do. They love to create little worlds that we can enter into and share together. But the thing is that there are limitations when we create these holodeck environments. That's why they ultimately finish that. They come back into the objective world, into the persistent world. Because, for example, you will not meet people in a dreamscape who are sovereign entities, who are sovereign units of consciousness, who are connected to source and representing an individual awareness. They will instead be kind of like what we may call NPCs, non-player characters. It's a common abbreviation for just simulated people that are not sovereign entities on their own way. So we can encounter those during lucid dreams or even non-lucid dreams, when our own mind creates these characters that can be very convincing to us, but ultimately they don't have their own thoughts. They're not real, and an empath would not feel any connection to them as real people. And so those are among the different problems with going to these types of worlds on a long-term basis. But they make excellent places to explore, play, and create environments, and there's no reason that we cannot use that as a technique to make contact with our deceased loved ones, simply using the power of what we call visualization. But I do not think that these visualized created realms are literal astral environments. I believe that there is a distinction here between a persistent shared astral world, possibly even sharing literal space in the cosmos, such as connected or interwoven with our own world. I don't think that these are the same types of places, and I think that we sometimes go into these metaphysical, philosophical equivalents of quicksand when we try to fuse these things together, because we can't say the entire astral dimension is a non-persistent dreamscape, because it doesn't really match what we've been taught, and it would also make it a kind of, in my opinion, a little bit of a depressing existence if everything is just continually changing from one moment to the next. You can't, go to a city that you love and be able to have a life there and, keep it as it is, because everything is in fluctuation like a dream. And I don't have any reason to think that in my astral experiences, astral cities are always, it's persistent. You can leave a note on a door and come back later, and the note will still be there. It's a shared reality like the one we're in now. But for many people, though, it could be a lot of fun to be able to create these inner worlds and then to share them with a loved one. But maybe not a good place to spend the rest of your existence, but definitely something that's fun. And I think that this is what's happening with these visualization-based experiences. I would not call them astral projection, unless it really was like a guided out-of-body experience where where the patient feels themselves leaving their body. Unless that happens, then I would call it a shared dreaming experience being used to create after-death contact. So those are my thoughts about that. Hope you liked the interview. Please hit that subscribe button and stay in touch, and head on over to the Patreon page, patreon.com/Afterlife Topics. Get involved in classes or special one-on-one work with myself. The a few shekels being tossed into the pile helps me keep on with this work, because it takes a lot of work doing all this, and it cuts into my normal working hours with my publishing work and my clients, and to the extent where sometimes, you know, it's like I'm kind of like hemorrhaging money. So if anybody wants to donate, that's always appreciated. But yeah, this is Cyrus, and I'll catch you guys on the next video, or on the next interview. We have some more interviews coming up that will be really cool as well. Okay, talk to you next time.